David Calloway, and today I'm going to be doing a speech on the Battle of Leyte Gulf, also known as the Battle of Samar. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds, from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. These are the words of Ernest Edwin Evans, the commander of the USS Johnston, just before he turned his ship around to face certain death, but quite possibly to save the lives of men on the beaches of Leyte. Now, I don't believe this kind of courage can be understood, not unless it's shared, unless it's in the moment. But today I will try and explore the amazing achievement of the American sailors and pilots in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's also known as the Battle of Samar. Now, I've long been fascinated by the exemplary courage displayed during World War II, and this battle holds a special place for me because my grandfather was on the ship in Taffy 2, who was able to observe this battle, though he did not directly engage in it. Now, I'm going to start this informative speech by explaining the events leading to this rare matchup. Then, we'll move to the matchup itself, and lastly, to frame the weight behind these men's courage and the consequences. Now, so I understand how this came about. This was a plan of the Japanese called the show plan. The show plan involved three major points: a Japanese decoy, and then a two-fleet pincer movement. The decoy mostly consisted of light Japanese aircraft carriers that were already badly damaged and crippled. This was used to draw Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, one of the most powerful fleets of the time, away from the Philippines and the men landing on the beaches of Leyte and out into the open ocean. This part of the Japanese plan was successful. They then had a plan to have two battle groups and a pincer movement come from both the north and south side of the Philippines. One of these fleets did arrive with complete tactical surprise. The other fleet was unfortunately destroyed. Well, not destroyed, but crippled, and many of its ships had to steam home, unable to continue the battle. So, now that we know how this came about, we're going to talk about what the fight was. The battle consisted of, on the American side, 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts, and 400 American aircraft. The Japanese consisted of 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. As you guys can see from those numbers, in destroyers alone, the Japanese had the Americans outgunned. Not to mention that 2 of those battleships were the largest battleships ever made in world history, one of which was the Yamato. Yamato had 18.1-inch guns and could fire over 23 miles. The American largest ships they had in this battle was the Fletcher destroyer classes. Their largest armament was 5-inch guns. They had 3 of them. The 5-inch guns were not capable of penetrating the hull or doing any significant damage to any of the vital systems on the Yamato. But despite that, the commander of the Johnston said that this will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which we can not expect to survive, but we will do what damage we can. And with those words, he turned his ship headlong into the enemy fleet, ordering the rest of Taffy 3 and the other Taffies around the island supporting the invasion of the men on the Leyte Gulf to retreat. His ship steamed straight toward the Japanese fleet until they were within torpedo range, which is roughly 10 to 12 miles. They fired their torpedoes, exhausted what little ammunition they could from their 5-inch gun, which once again wasn't capable of damaging most of the ships in the Japanese fleet. And then they turned around and began to deploy smoke, retreating. Now, this was a courageous thing to do. And amazingly, they survived. So far. Next, after seeing his courage, the 2 remaining destroyers in Taffy 3 decided to support his ship. They engaged, and to make a very heroic story shorter due to the time of the speech. I'll tell you the losses. In the combined battles of Leyte Gulf, 10,000 Japanese sailors were lost and 3,000 Americans died. And although the battleship Yamato and the remaining forces returned to Japan, this battle was the last time those ships ever sailed again. See, this battle was the defining point in the naval history of World War II, because this was the last time the Japanese Navy ever sailed in any significant numbers against their American enemies. The courage of these 3 little ships and 400 planes, which, just to give a little more perspective, no planes in any of Taffy had torpedoes or armor-piercing bombs, which would be the only thing that had any chance of sinking any of these ships. Instead, they would fly their planes straight into the enemy ships and strafe them, oftentimes even when they had no ammo, just to be a distraction, just to try to get these ships to turn away, just with an ounce of hope that the men on the beaches wouldn't be shelled to death before they ever get off the sand. There's actually even reports that one pilot, after exhausting all of his 50 caliber rounds in his Hellcat, began circling the enemy battleship, firing his sidearm, hopelessly trying to injure someone. It's amazing, though. You see, these odds should never have won. The Americans should have been decimated. But these 3 destroyers fought with such veracity that the Japanese admiral actually believed he was engaging Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet, which was miles away in the open ocean. And believing that he was so vastly outgunned and so vastly overwhelmed by the American carriers and 4 American battleships that had survived Pearl Harbor, he ordered a full retreat. Now, I'm sure you can see that this was a fairly incredible thing. It was miraculous. It was amazing. And what it boils down to was the courage. Because 2 of those 3 American destroyers were sunk. One, in fact, after being surrounded, losing its forward gun and its engine bay, as well as its command structure, the captain gave the order to abandon ship. The men in its gunnery department refused to abandon ship and manually loaded the munitions and aimed the gun until literally every single piece of the ship was blown apart. No man was recovered from the ship that decided to make its last stand. But their ferocity once again saved the men on the beaches. See, this battle could have been a turning point in the Pacific, because this could have been the time that the Japanese halted the American progress. They could have crippled our fleets, crippled our ability to attack, crippled our ability to supply, maybe made the war last longer. But instead, a few men made a brave choice. In my opinion, an impossible choice. But that choice, in a lot of ways, defined a generation and a nation by ending a war sooner, costing less lives, and giving us amazing stories to tell. So, it's my hope that these men continue to be remembered. And I hope this story both inspires us and informs us to be better and to be more willing to know what's worth living for, what's worth not living for, and what we hold most precious. Is it ourselves or is it the people around us? So, that concludes my speech, and I hope you've enjoyed it.